Kristi, the Worm Nanny here, and it is time for spring cleaning. So I'm going to show you how to harvest castings from your winter worm bin and get it ready for the spring season. So I've got quite a spread here. This is my main worm bin, and it helps to do it when it's really sunny out, a little bit warm. I'm trying to dry out the castings because when they're really quite wet and sticky, it's hard to sift them. So I am layering them, and as they dry, I'm going to harvest them, and then all the worms are going to burrow their way down to the bottom and hide away from the light and away from the sun. I also try to speed up the process by laying out some castings on black trays or other surfaces just to dry them out a little bit to make things a bit easier. So I have just a regular kitchen colander and a nice little bowl that actually fits quite well inside of it. And I take a handful of the castings and then just basically shake them around. You can also use something like a cat litter box scoop, but with something this small, it can take quite a long time. And we're just gonna sift out the castings there, and then they're gonna fall into the bowl underneath. So I'm gonna collect those, put them off to the side. Once I get down to the bottom, you can see that I've been working away on this bin for most of the day today. There's a few worms that are kind of sticking around to the edges, but most of them are in this really deep pile. As I'm going, I am sifting out the really big pieces of bedding. So if you have food, I've got some potato peels in here, some lettuce scraps. If I'm finding worms, they're gonna go in to a separate pile, and that's gonna go back into my active worm bin. So as I've been going, I've just been kind of sifting off the top, putting it into my colander, getting out the dry castings as best I can, and then repeating. But this this bin is been very healthy over the winter. So if you can get a little bit closer in here, as you can see, if I move this around, this is just basically pure worms. So I'm not going to be able to sift out the worms away from the castings. These guys, there's lots of little babies in there. You can see the little tiny white worms in there, and they know it's springtime, so they are breeding prolifically and getting down to business. So I've sifted out as much of the castings as I can. Most of the worms are in the bottom here. I'm going to add all the other bedding and larger materials that I've pulled out. And then we're going to add our bedding material to keep these guys happy and keep them going. So if you've watched any of my previous videos, or if you know a little bit about how to keep a worm bin, we use just dried leaves for their bedding. We add newspaper. So I've been shredding some newspaper today, making little strips of it, and then moistening it as I go. So the idea is that you want your bedding to be basically nice and moist, kind of like a wrung out sponge. So if I give that a little squeeze, you can see there's a little bit of droplets of water coming out. That's perfect. And we're just going to layer that on top of the old bedding, the worms themselves, and then eventually kind of fill this up as much as you can. The last thing that I do before I put my worms away is I'm going to moisten some just straight either newspaper works or some sheets of paper. I'm going to get those nice and wet. If you have a spray bottle, that works really well. And that's to give the worms some air conditioning. So when it gets really warm, now that it's going to start heating up, you want to make sure that these top layers of paper are good and moist. And then when that evaporates, it's going to cool the worm bin and keep them at the right temperature. Finally, to put them away, store them in my garage, and we keep a lid on them that has holes in it for air circulation. You can see on the edges of the bin, there's holes again for circulation. And we want to store it always with the lid a little bit off so that we don't overheat the worms or suffocate them. If you have any questions, please comment on the video below. Thank you for watching and enjoy your worms.